Imagine having a circle of elders to teach you, guide you, inspire you with their wisdom, and they all have your best interests at heart. My name's Carol Talbot. I'm the creator and founder of the Possibility Hub, and in this episode, my guest, Paul Fischbach, shares some of the wisdom and teachings passed to him by the 44 grandmothers during his shamanic initiation. Hello, Paul. I've been excited and looking forward to this session because we're going to be introduced and meet the 44 grandmothers. Probably not all 44 in this session. And many people may not know who they are, what they are. And I'm curious to know how you came to have that connection with the 44 grandmothers. Tell us more.
So in my initiation year, so just to clarify again, so your initiation period is your apprenticeship period is a year and a day. The initiation period for men's initiation is 7 years. So in the apprenticeship period, you're given over to various teachers. So as I was passed from tribe to tribe across Canada and back across the US, it was largely, I was thrown to grandmothers. And I would arrive on a reserve, and it would be, you know, the medicine man would kind of like, oh, someone to do a lot of work for me. And the grandmother would run up and go, nope, he's mine, get away. So I was taken by the grandmothers. So that seemed to be the way it went. And then somewhere toward the about maybe middle of that apprenticeship year, you make an agreement with some spirit guides. So there's your first group of spirit guides that are going to help you with your apprenticeship period and into your initiation years. And most people get, you know, a particular group of spirit guides, or, you know, they show up and they look like angels, or I get the grandmothers. So my teacher hands me a beautiful pouch of hair, human hair. And she says, these are clippings from the grandmothers. So I'll teach you the ritual that you do, but if the grandmothers are going to accept you and teach you, then they'll share the song with you. So I'm, all right, we'll give this a go. So I do the thing, and I do all the thing that I'm taught, and I burn the hairs, and suddenly I hear the song, like the tune, the lyrics, the whole thing. It's a bit of a silly song. And so the instruction is that you burn these hairs, you sing this song, and you get transported to the council of the grandmothers. Okay, so we go. So I go and I do this, and it's always for the first probably year or so, well, even now, it's this same particular cave. And it's a cave with a big shelter opening. And it's a big crescent shelter opening that faces, the direction can change. Sometimes it faces the west, sometimes it faces the east, but it's a big flat area. So I found myself in this big circle. So there they are. There's all these grandmothers sitting around in this big circle. I have no idea really how many there are, but it's quite a big circle. And I'm thrown into the middle. So I don't have a seat around the circle with them. That happened years later. But at the beginning, it was lots of healing. So there was lots of dismemberment. So they would be slicing me open, and they would be taking organs out, and they would be changing things and doing things and putting me back together. And then there were times where I'd be sitting there close to the fire, and they would come and they would smack me really hard on the back, and it would fling this luminous body out. And so then there would be two of me, and I would be sitting there with this kind of crude physical body, but then I would see this luminous form of me, and they would take that away for adventures and teaching and leave this one here. So it was just an extraordinary experience. So for the first year, it was just lots of lessons. And a grandmother would come forward and she would say, I'm here to teach you about something. So there's 44 different lessons that were led by a particular grandmother. So she would introduce herself and say, I'm here to teach you this thing. So that's the 44 of them, are because they were kind of had a specialty, each of the grandmothers. And sometimes I would go, and it was the sweetest thing. I would look around the circle, and sometimes there would be like just a shell sitting there and no grandmother. And sometimes there would be like a little note. It would say, out on a journey, out on, out to, not out to lunch, but, away. So sometimes there would be a placeholder if there wasn't a grandmother. And so I asked at one point, I said, well, what is that? And they said, well, some of the grandmothers are actually incarnated at the same time you are. So some of the grandmothers actually are living at the same time you are. So they aren't always here. Some of the grandmothers are in that in-between place and live in this dimension full time. And other grandmothers are ring-ins.
What's that?
So that if there's a particular issue, they will come in. So I'll explain that when we get to the sacred hoop grandmothers. So sometimes they're augmented with these guest grandmothers that come in, but they're all women. They're all old, wise women. And so at some point I learned that there were 44 of them and that they all had a particular specialty and that they form this incredible council. And sometimes they do work. They're not always there for me. They're doing work. So they're dealing with crises on the earth plane. They're dealing with incarnation issues. They're a very wise council that gets used for all kinds of purposes. So it wasn't until years and years and years later, when they asked me to sit in one of the positions, that I got to deal with what happens for the council. So one of their functions is when there's a struggle about incarnation, when a soul wants to come in, but there's a conflict. So there might have been a contract and the soul has decided that it's learned a bunch of things and it doesn't want to complete that contract. So it wants to revise the contract, or it wants help to figure out a new purpose to incarnate. And they counsel with the grandmothers. And we would sit and we would listen to this soul about what it is it wanted to do or what it wanted to change. And there was a discussion. And I was just silent. I just voted. I didn't say anything for the longest time. So I thought, who the hell am I? But, after years, I would participate. So
have you met some of these grandmothers who are in incarnate form as well?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. And I think that's just economical, that if I'm around, there doesn't need to be someone else.
Yes.
For a while, I kind of was suspected that Rhoda was one.
Interesting.
And I'm still not sure that she might be. But she doesn't seem to speak of that or have a conscious awareness of it.
Yes, and that may also be a contract agreement not to have the conscious awareness of it.
Probably, yeah.
And doesn't mean you're any less. And she is a very extraordinary woman. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Because when I first met her, the sense of knowing I had with her was the grandmother's energy. It was that circle. It's like, wait a minute, I know you from sitting in circle with you. It wasn't like I know you from past lives or something. It was like, wait a minute, we've done work together. So who knows? But I did meet a woman, a medicine woman in Colorado, who blah, 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 grandmother. She said, I work with the Council of Grandmothers. Like, so do you meet in this cave? Yes. And are they sitting in? Yes. And is there a fire? Yes. And does the yes. And so it's very similar, if not identical. And she worked with this Council of Grandmothers as well as her particular spirit guide. So it's kind of that they're my spirit guide instead of other kinds of teams. So when I do a session with someone, I can see their spirit guides, and then the grandmothers come forward to help and give advice.
So do all 44 grandmothers come forward, except the ones who've sort of left their out for lunch kind of card? Or do specific grandmothers come forward because specific grandmothers share certain wisdom, certain gifts that are appropriate at that time?
Yeah, that's the case. So when I do a grandmother session, I have no idea how many are going to come forward. There's always a couple, 2 or 3 that come forward because, we think this is, we've got something to share here, something to help. And then sometimes I've had sessions where they go, wait a minute, we need to go get someone. And they'll go bring another grandmother forward and interrupt whatever she was doing and have her come and say, you need to hear this. And then they have just the most incredible wisdom. So I guess the lessons, I mean, there's a big long list of them, right?
I know you told me that when you first met them and were getting all these lessons, you kind of wrote it all down, almost like a book. It sounds like a book that really needs to be completed and published, John Paul, if I might say.
I know.
And if you're open to sharing some of that wisdom that some of them shared with you, with our audience today, that would be amazing.
Yeah, happy to. So each one has a particular specialty. And then there were 3 grandmothers. So 2 grandmothers shared the healing part. And they speak of themselves as the holders of the sacred hoop. So there's 2 sacred hoops for healing. There's the sacred hoop of external things that you need for healing and internal. So the 2 grandmothers hold these particular hoops. And so there are things like balance, breath, limits, boundaries, dismemberment. And then there's one of the most beautiful ones in the healing work is the grandmother that holds the sacred hoop of internal healing. And her lesson to me was to have me for days document myself in keeping myself internally strong, internally whole. And she said that there were 9 acts that I had to do every day. And I had to keep a journal and I had to list these 9. And I had to rank myself from 1 to 10 on how well I did on that act. So I think it's extraordinary to think of yourself, if you're trying to keep yourself internally in that sacred healed place, the acts every day, you must perform an act of love, study, craft, movement, breathing, cleansing and purification, blessing and prayer, nourishment, and sleep and dreaming. So it was a challenge. Some days to go, okay, craft, I haven't done any craft today. So it's making something simple.
Yes.
So sometimes I decided to take the nourishment and make the preparation of the meal into craft. And cleansing and purification, we don't do that every day, but that's not hard. So it was really interesting in the days when you don't have movement and you don't do conscious, focused breathing. Well, the power of that one. So I thought that was just incredible. So that's how it would go, is that she would say, I hold the sacred hoop for internal healing. This is what you have to do. So she would give me this recipe. You have to track yourself. So I think it was 9 acts across 9 days. And, how did you do with each of those? Another one that was incredible in the sacred hoop of healing was talking about limits and saying that limits are an important thing. And her teaching for the limits said that there's internal limits that you set that are the hard ones. The external limits are easy, and you know how to set those. But she said to me, there's 7 internal ones that you have to grapple with. So she said, I want you to be on the lookout for these. So she gave me 7 challenges to watch for, because she said, the minute you have one of these, you need to set an internal limit. It was incredible. So they were ignorance, confusion, procrastination, anger, fear, and doubt. So one of the most profound ones for me was fear. And I failed. I completely failed at fear. I wasn't good at setting a limit for it. It would just take over. So she went to the other grandmother who did external healing and said, we need to help. John Paul's needs some help with fear. So the grandmothers in a ritual gave me a thing called a fears eater.
Oh, I like that. Yes, please.
Well, so it was this black slimy thing. So they said the black slimy thing will just stay around in your auric field. So I would sometimes be aware of it kind of by weight on my body or if it moved around. So it was a fears eater and it lived externally. And the deal is that you have to speak the fear out loud and the fears eater will take it. So just say the fear out loud and the fears eater will take it because that's what it needs. That's what it's a fears eater. That's its food. If you don't speak the fear out loud, but you keep the fear inside, the fears eater comes into your body and you don't want that.
Exactly.
So
you.
Yes. So I didn't speak the fears. I kept them inside. And so the fears eater was inside and the grandmothers were like, oh no, oh, now we have to go get it out. So there was this whole psychic surgery thing and they had to get it out. And they said, we don't know, we're going to have to really counsel about this because we could give it back to you, but you cannot keep the fears inside or it'll go inside because it's feeding on the fears. So it was such a powerful lesson.
That's so profound as well for these days and times where people have trauma, anxiety, stress. I'm thinking of one of my clients recently, and emotion was coming up for him, and yet he left the room. He couldn't display it, couldn't share it, and the whole session I could see the control that he's not expressed, these fears, and of course they are eating him away with depression, eruptions of anger and temper, and I've seen this in other people as well. For our times, because of social media, we have to look a certain way, we have to be a certain way, and so we're not speaking our truth and we're afraid to let who we really are out. So what is it doing? It's eating us away inside. And when you were going through that list, not just fear, but I could put my hand up for quite a few of those.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yep.
So
no,
my goodness,
so
the
great
work that these give you to, and I just like using the word work, the insights and the awakening that this gives you in terms of clearing. And just to backtrack a little here, John Paul, dismemberment. People may feel a little bit uncomfortable with that. And I know in shamanic journeying, when you go to the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world is complete, being ripped apart by a bear, if I'm not mistaken. And then, of course, when you come back, you're remembered and in a different way. Do you want to explain a little about this dismemberment, just so that people aren't like, oh, holy moly, that sounds awful?
Yeah. So the understanding is that we have a luminous body that's part of ourselves, and we have a physical body. So there's an emotional body, a spiritual body, a mental body. There's all these layers to ourselves. So when you're in one of these ceremonies or you're in one of these healing rituals, they're working with one of those bodies. So the physical body is the densest one. So if they're going to separate your bodies into the various layers and they're going to do surgery or tear something apart or clean something out, it's a beautiful thing because there's always the remembering, the reconstituting, the putting the layers back together. So what they do for you is they separate these things out and they clear out what needs to be taken out because sometimes it just has to get removed. So I think that Western medicine says if this thing is growing and it's a bad thing, we pluck it out. Well, the same thing happens in shamanic ritual. If this thing is in the emotional body is not serving and it's going awry, we've got to pluck it out. So you look forward, as a shaman, you look forward to dismemberments, because then you know for sure that something is being cleared. It's not like a ceremony where they go, no, you really should work on that. They just go and get it. They're like, enough, no more chitty chat. We're just gonna, we're gonna go in there, we're gonna get that thing out. And it's just perfect because they're in control. They're working on all the subtle bodies and they put you back together.
That's incredible, and that makes people view it in a different way. And sometimes just pulling a little bit out here, a little bit out there, and of course it treats us holistically rather than just treating this part or dealing with that. One bad apple affects everything. So pulling it all apart, cleaning it all out, and then putting it back together in a completely new way, remembering. Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yep.
So look, we've heard wisdom from just two of the grandmothers now, and yet,
Yes.
you've got the sort of 9 days with the 9 acts, and then, all those, even just on fear, speaking up, and then going through all the others like procrastination and some of the others that you were mentioning. We've got quite a lot of work there to do just for two grandmothers.
Yeah. So it was the better part of a year and a half. So sometimes they would say, I'm here to teach you about purpose or vision or potential or perspective or concern. That was a powerful one. Protection, guidance, record keeping, agreements, communication, transition, death and dying, remembering, tradition, purity. So there was they all came forward with a particular thing. And sometimes it was a week that it took me to, have lessons. Sometimes it was quick. Sometimes it was just a shift of perspective, just a paradigm shift that you made. So some of them were quick, some of them were longer. And it was interesting because I never knew how long, I had no idea that it was going to be one lesson per grandmother. I didn't know that when we started. I just thought, is this going to be like, how long are we going to do this? How far is this going to go? Because there was the next lesson and here's the next lesson. And it took me a while to cotton on that no grandmother was teaching me 2 lessons. So I'm like, all right. So, my little brain went, well, I think if there's 44 of them, I think there's 44 lessons. And, that's kind of how it worked out. And then
did he call you out on your stuff? Because as you said, you knew there were some fears to come out. And a lot of people are in denial or not aware of the block. It's like, you can't see your own backside. You're not aware of the limiting belief or what is holding you back. So are they holding up a mirror almost to let you know, or calling you out, saying, when you say, okay, that's done, and they're going, really?
Yeah, no, they're not your indulgent grandmother who's giving you lollies and, telling you you're amazing. They're the grandmothers that have the wisdom that are like, listen, enough. They're serious. They are serious, serious grandmothers with incredible amounts of love. I never felt that they were reprimanding me or that they were disciplining or just fierce. They can be fierce, but it's always for an incredible purpose. And like the fears eater thing, it's like, no, you have to get this. We're not letting up until you get this. So they're, they'll stay on you, but yeah, it's all about the real work. It wasn't, what's one that would be fun? Heightened awareness. So she said, okay, I'm going to teach you about heightened awareness, because she said that was going to be part of my work, was to be able to will myself into a state of heightened awareness. So she went through all of this, trying to help me understand the difference between regular awareness and heightened awareness. So she said that heightened awareness comes about and brings a fine grade of electrical energy. Awareness will always have a little buzzy electrical charge to it. So she worked, and I had to practice and say, are you feeling that? Is that awareness or is that heightened awareness? Because you can have good awareness. That's great. but heightened awareness brings that you're bringing in that other level. So she said that awareness is the warrior's first processing in any encounter. So any encounter you have in the spiritual dimension, you have to have awareness, because you need to know, well, where is this coming from? This thing that I'm encountering, is it positive? Does it have an intention of its own? Is it, for me? So you have to have that level of awareness. And she said, then the next trick is to go into heightened awareness and see what its fine energy is. So it's the finer, subtle flow. And I think that was the thing that helped me the most with being a sight whisperer. Because I would come to a site, you'd feel aware of the energy, or, this is a cool thing. And then it's that heightened awareness that was my ability to have like kind of that, find it on the radio, which frequency is it exactly that you're tuning into. So I thought, that was one of the most incredible lessons.
So was that the lesson that helped you develop the sight whispering? Before that, you hadn't become aware that you were also a sight whisperer, and with the heightened awareness, that opened up the next gift that you were bringing into the world.
Yeah. So she would travel with me. So we would be somewhere in nature, and she would show up, and she'd say, okay, shift from awareness to heightened awareness. Go, I'll watch you. Oh, okay, I'll do it. She would watch and shift. And so she would send me things. She would send me little frequencies. She would talk about time. And she'd say, okay, I want you to go to heightened awareness, and I want you to find the time when this was covered in snow. So it was beautiful how she coached me and challenged me when we would be out in nature. And she just was there right next to me, saying, all right, practice, let's go.
This must have been an incredible time for you, and to have these experiential lessons in the field, so to speak, so that you've got the things you need to do in terms of the clearing, the awareness, and now the heightened self-awareness and the experiential lessons when she's actually there teaching you. What a gift. What a gift.
Yeah, it was absolutely extraordinary. And it still happens. They're a little bit stronger with me as time went on, that if I would trip over something, they would just say, we've been over this. Remember, we did this. So one of the things that I think I should share is the grandmother that taught me about practice.
Yes. And I was also going to ask if you have, we have an affinity to certain people or elders, and if there were certain ones that you feel even now a stronger affinity to. So let's go into first. Go into the practice first. That would be wonderful.
Okay, but remember that question, because that's a good one. So practice, the first thing she did was explain that there's what is your practice, the thing that you do in the world. And then there's practice that's repetition. So she said, we're going to work on both of those, because I want you to clarify, she said to me, please clarify what your practice is, the thing that you're going to do in the world, so that I can design for you the practice that you need to repeat in order to be good at that. So she pulled the two practices together, which was incredible. And she gave me these, she gave me these phrases, which I'll share with you. And I had to write them and put them on the wall. And I had to work with them for a day, only one day each one, but it was pretty good. So the first one was, practice is the activity you willingly engage in as a direct correlation to enhancing your particular reality. So it took me a while to unpack that, to say, okay, if it's an activity that I willingly engage in, I get that part. That's directly related to enhancing my particular reality. So again, well, what is it you want? Well, then let's willingly engage in an activity that enhances that thing that you believe or want. So it's about choosing the activities that are going to enhance the reality that you want. So that became a whole study of, well, how am I spending my time? What is it that I'm doing? And what is it that I'm repeatedly doing? And does that enhance the reality that I want?
And of course, it also comes round to getting clarity on, as you said, what is it that I really want? And I think that's also a space and place where many people struggle, that we look to others and look at their life and say, I want to be like this, I want to be like that. And then you follow that path. And I know this is something that I used to do when I was younger. I never had a clear, direct path. That I used to look at other people and think, oh, that looks a good job. So I used to train and I'd go and follow that path for a while. And then I'd get bored. I don't have a very long attention span. I'd learn everything. And then, you know, a couple of years later, it's like, what else? What else? Oh, yes, that looks an exciting role. So I'd, you know, go there. And I remember my mother say, oh, you'll never get to the top of the ladder if you keep switching. But what it did was it gave me, you know, such a tapestry, a rich tapestry of so many different areas to explore, because I've always been curious. And, you know, then when I moved into learning and development, well, that's a never-ending field anyway, because you're always learning something new, and that's one of my passions. And what I see when I work with people is that there comes a time when they have to find their own path, not following somebody else's path. And so when you say, you know, what is it that you want to see in your reality and what path, many people don't have that clarity. And particularly now when it seems that certain paths are blocked.
Yeah. Well, to the point of that you're saying with the people that you worked with, one of her phrases, I knew I had something like it, was, she said to me, your method of practice is how you can learn about yourself and gain an understanding of yourself. So it's like, yeah, you know, what is your method of practice? That's what you're going to learn about yourself and how you do that. Then she said, the ultimate goal is that practice becomes impeccability. And I thought that was beautiful, that your practice and the practice of your practice just becomes impeccability. And that's your solid, you know, in proper practice, you and the tools fuse into one. So that was really beautiful. She also had me work on practice eliminates doubt. That if you really practice, then there is no doubt. Practice encourages faith, because you stay with it. You have the faith that you will conquer this, you'll get this. Practice is the key to illumination. That was a fun one. To say, as you practice and as your practice grows, you see more becomes revealed to you. You know, it's the novice doesn't get all the wisdom. The one who's practiced really hard starts to see the power and the wisdom.
And embodying who you are and what you are. I look back to my time with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and although I don't run so many certification programs these days, it's not just something I was doing. It's become part, you know, the learnings and the lessons and the philosophy behind it have become part of who I am, you know, and the way that I sort of operate in life or live in life. So I love that impeccability, you know, being the best that you can be in what you choose.
Well, and in you and the tools fused into one. It's just you now. It's not you using a tool. It's you and the tool are inseparable. Yeah. One of the other ones. So I always think it's good when I share these to talk about that. You know, I wasn't the perfect student. I had foibles, and you know, the fears eater, I swallowed it, and you know, there are things like that it's a real thing. So when I was supposed to be doing this practice stuff, I was doing a lot of, you know, reading and, you know, chatting. So she sat me down and she said, okay, the only way that you're going to improve is practice. You cannot improve by gaining more knowledge. You cannot improve by believing that you can. You can only improve with practice. Okay.
Okay, so that was like a little slap around the face.
Yeah. That was just, come on, you've got to practice. As you said, practice is going to be the thing that's going to help your discipline, as you said, more than anything. So stop. It's not about how much you know. It's not about believing that you can do this. You've got to practice.
And so you did.
And so I did.
So going back to my previous question, were there some of the grandmothers that you felt more of an affinity with, or you liked a little bit more? You know, it's a little bit like your favorite teacher at school. You know, some were okay, and some you just like were so excited about their class.
Yeah. I grew to love them all because they had my highest good and that was the intention, was to make me the best that I can be. So like you would love any coach, no matter how hard they are, because they believe in your potential. So, you know, it's incredible to have this group of teachers that want you to be the best you can be. And that it's the point that I was asked to sit in circle with them was an incredible honor to say, am I good enough? Right? So one of my favorite grandmothers, there's kind of a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that just keep appearing over and over and over as I work with people. And it's purpose, vision. So these are the specialists with purpose, vision, intention, potential, opportunity, and perspective. And they come through all the time. There are so many people that come to have a grandmother session that are confused, or they're at a crossroads. So one of these, well, you know, opportunities, she'll pop up and she'll say, okay, I'll help because I can see choices you can't see. I can explain to you where the blind side is and why you're not seeing these choices. So she's just incredible. So she says, she calls herself the cut-through grandmother. She said, I'm the one that's going to help you just cut through. So the faster, if you're on path, you have a good intention, your vision is clear, then I'll just help you cut through. Here, go there. You know, so she's the best because she does, and she gets really excited when she sees, you know, the possibilities. You know, so she and they say they're sisters. So the specialist with opportunity and the specialist with potential, and they'll refer to each other and they'll play off of each other. And they'll say, well, my sister told you this, so I'm going to now explain this. So opportunity is just saying, well, you could do this or this. And potential, what she always teaches you is to say, well, you know, the thing and the energy that's coming toward you, what has the potential? These are all a bunch of choices, but here's energy that's coming. So she's just, the two of them are great. And then purpose, she's amazing. She is so cool when she works with people about purpose, because they'll be a little bit off purpose. Their confusion is they've just kind of been a bit wonky with purpose. So she just asks and she says, well, is this your purpose or is this your purpose? Is that really your purpose? And so she just helps you really clarify the purpose. And then, you know, so they're my favorites because they're so helpful. And I think, you know, those of us that are on the path, we have choices and we sometimes get confused.
Yeah, we need to sort of hone in, and there's crossroads, or we go here, and you know, people want to feel that they're making the right choice. So at certain times in life, we need, you know, the guidance of the elders and these grandmothers. So how does a session work with you? Do people need to do it in person, or have you, can you be anywhere in the world and online? How do people do these sessions with you?
Yeah, it can be done. I mean, I love it, of course, in person. That's my favorite.
Absolutely.
No, people are doing them online. It's a Zoom kind of a thing, which is kind of boring on Zoom because I'm doing the heightened awareness thing. So I'm kind of looking like this while I'm talking to you because I'm listening to the grandmothers. So I don't actually look at you. It's a weird Zoom thing to do, but yeah, no, it's a Zoom session, and it starts with sometimes questions, but I don't, you know, you'll be, what's an issue? or what's a question? And then the grandmothers just show up. And so the hardest part for me is to try to help you understand, oh, this grandmother's telling you this, but then this one's saying this. Oh, but then she says, so it's kind of, going back and forth about who's talking and which grandmother is it. And then quite often there's a really cheeky one that's just, poking the thing that's really gonna get you going. And, they'll say funny things, or they'll say, oh, for God's sake, get over yourself. Yeah. Quite often they'll say to someone, well, if you let go of that preciousness, or, if you let go, that, or they'll just say, well, that's just your belief. So we can unpack that belief, but that's just a belief that you're holding. It isn't true. It's just a belief. You've made it true. It's like, oh.
So sometimes we need to hear those brutal truths. So
Yeah.
people, what they can do right now, they can either contact you for a session, and yet you've given such richness in this conversation in terms of what was it, the 9 acts for 9 days. They can get going on those. Then the fear eaters, speaking your fear, so that you're
the seven challenges.
And the 7 challenges, absolutely, would be work that people can get started on right now to start sort of clearing their field.
Yep. There's another easy one that people could work on. That's was the grandmother that looked at was her specialty was wisdom. And she said, wisdom is very simple, because there's in the choice that you make, there's just time and action. She said, that's all there is. You have an action and a time that you commit that action. So she said, if you want to find the wisdom, imagine doing it without time, and imagine the time from now till going without doing the action, and you will have wisdom. And it was so powerful to say, okay, there's this thing I could do, but I don't know if it's the wisest thing to do. So she says, well, imagine from now to then, and you don't do it, and just watch what happens if you don't do the action. Okay, then just do the action, and what happens? Don't put it in time. So if you leave them, one alone without the other, it was incredible. So we practiced that, and she said, well, see, so what you've got now is an ability to sense, to know, to recognize, and to assess. And that was a really cool exercise.
Yes, it's a future pacing and then being it right now.
Yeah.
Without the distortions of time. Absolutely. Love it.
Without the distortion of the time or the distortion of the action. Because, one of the great laws that they taught me a long time ago was show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and don't have any expectation of the outcome. And, that's the job every day, is just to try to do that. And I thought, yep. And if you can do that, and then you have some of these exercises, you can be incredibly wise. Because as you say, you've future paced it. You've pulled the action out and analyzed it. You've looked at the time, and then you've found it out where the two should be, when, how they should work together. And you've got it. So it's amazing.